So I'm going to start with the balance sheet and then get to the operating statement. I just wanted to call your attention to a few items on the balance sheet. Looking at the assets compared to June, you'll see lower cash than at fiscal year end in June, but that's in part, cash goes up and down for various reasons, but in part because every September we make our deposit to the pension plans, and so cash is used in September and then is replenished. We've also used cash over the last year to make payments for the green line, and so cash has been drawn down to complete that. But the corresponding movement on the balance sheet is you'll see an increase in our assets, higher numbers for property and equipment as we turn cash into investment in the system. You will also see higher receivables. The line for receivables is higher in October. This includes $22 million that was owed to us by the City of Portland as their contribution for the Green Line or the Mall project. What you don't see, and you'll see next month, is that was received in November. It was actually received earlier than anticipated. So that $22 million came into the city just last week. On the liability side, the only thing I'd like to point out is our long-term debt. It has increased since June because, as you reported last month, we closed our bond issue. But our long-term debt is still lower than it was a year ago because we've been paying down the FTA 2006 FTA bonds. So any other questions on the balance sheet before I move to the operating statement? On the operating statement, where we look at revenues and expenses, you see that our revenues are about 5% under budget, and this is due to both lower than budgeted payroll tax and passenger revenues. So where we are with payroll taxes, and again, just to review, we have a lag in our receipt of the taxes. So in July and August, September, our first quarter of this fiscal year, the money we received reflects what was earned and taxed in April, May, and June, so the end of last fiscal year. And so our actual receipts in that first quarter were about 3.5% lower than the prior year, and that's despite the increase in the tax rate. So now we're into the second quarter and looking at what our receipts are reflecting economic activity in the first quarter. And we're not through yet, so we don't have the final numbers, but it looks like they're coming in significantly lower than where we were last year, like 8 to 9% lower. And when I get to the other thing, this is explained largely by the employment statistics, which I will review. Our fiscal year 10 budget assumed a negative growth, underlying growth of 3% through the end of the year. And it appears we're going to be worse than that, but we are watching this very carefully. The other number, which is below budget, revenue number, which is below budget, is our passenger revenues, and they're lower by almost 11%. And when you look at the monthly performance report this month, you'll see that on a year-to-date basis, system boarding rides are down about 6%. And this also is worse than our assumptions in the budget. In the budget, we assumed no growth in bus or any of the light rail lines other than the Green Line, but we've actually seen declines in the lines other than the Green Line. Fortunately, if you look at operating expenses, these have also been running lower than budget by about 4%. I caution against taking 4 months on either the revenue or expense side as a definitive trend, but in looking at operations, which reflects over 80% of the operating budget expenses, personnel expenses have been under budget, and that's in large part because overall headcount is slightly lower than was budgeted. The largest favorable variances continue to be the accessible transportation program, where we are under budget by over $2 million. As you know, lift rides are down compared to last year, and costs for direct service in each county are lower, and administrative costs are lower than were budgeted. So there are many risks and many variants on the operating side. So again, caution on looking at this as a trend, but 2 risks that we do see, but we have no control over, are the winter storms and sickness. If flu keeps a lot of people out, then we could have high overtime expenses for both of those things. I'll conclude with the macroeconomic picture, but if there are questions on the operating results, I'm happy to take those now or later. I'll conclude with the macro picture then. The Oregon unemployment rate remained constant in October, which it was at 11.3%, but we're down from the high of over 12% in May. But on a bigger picture, the national unemployment rate continues to rise. It went to 10.2%, which was the highest in 26 years. So our three counties, just where we are there, Clackamas was unchanged at 10.6%. The Multnomah rate came down to just below 11% for the first time. And Washington is below 10% at 9.7%. And so for the first time, one of our counties is below the national average. If you look at total employment, not the rate, but the number of people employed, which is the most important driver of our revenues, for the first time in a year, the number of jobs actually increased in the Tri-County area. However, there's still 54,000 fewer jobs in the three counties than there were a year ago. And in the last couple, the overall loss nationally is over 7 million jobs since the recession began. So we're seeing signs that perhaps the economy has reached a bottom both here and nationally, but expert opinion is very mixed, and the consensus appears to be that there's modest growth might be starting, but the recovery will be slow, below average, and possibly just a downshift in long-term trend growth due to high unemployment. It's going to take a long time to build back up from that, lower consumer expenditures and constrained credit. So the bottom line for us is we are taking all of this into consideration. We're actually beginning the process of thinking about the fiscal year 11 budget already and monitoring carefully the fiscal year 10 budget. That concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
I might have missed it, but you said it looks like 2010 will be the percentage of decrease will be lower.
For our budget?
Yeah.
What we're looking at right now are lower revenues for the 4 months and lower expenditures. So I think if that continues, I'm cautioning against that conclusion, but the budget will be in balance. But we're monitoring what we can control, which is the expenditure side, very carefully, and we're obviously watching the revenue side. If it looks like it's out of balance mid-year, then we'll have to make a mid-year correction. But we're not at that, not at that conclusion. Did I answer your question, Mr. Wendell?
Very good.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth.